What's going on, everybody? I am here to do a review for the Janet Jackson documentary part 2. Of course, y'all already know and probably have seen part 1. Shout out to everybody who did watch it. All the feedback is definitely appreciated, whether good or bad or otherwise. But let's go ahead and get right into part 2. And I said part 2, I already knew going into this was going to be the mother lode of the entire thing. It's like they kicked it off kind of light with the part 1, but I knew part 2 it was going to hit on a lot of heavy hitting and controversial and scandalous topics in Janet's career. So as you all know, the first part ended off with her first tour, which was the Rhythm Nation tour. That was how the first part ended off, and the second part pretty much picks up where that one left off. So the first thing that they talked about in part 2 was her getting her star on a Hollywood Walk of Fame. And I felt Janet actually got hers pretty early. You know, some people, they take some years to get their star. Janet got hers pretty early. And it was a pretty big deal of her getting her star on the Walk of Fame, because now you have yet another Jackson who's gotten their star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, because the last Jackson to get theirs, of course, was Michael back in the early 80s, right around when Thriller was in its hype. And she got hers during Rhythm Nation. And I've always said that I've liked her Rhythm Nation costume. I always thought that was a fire costume, and she actually wore that costume when she got her star on the Walk of Fame. So that was a pretty big deal for her. At that point, Janet the only way she could go was up from there. The next thing that they talked about was her first starring role, which of course we all know is Poetic Justice. Of course, you know, starring alongside Tupac, Regina King, Guy Torry, John Singleton at the helm, being the director for the movie. I like that they show clips of the behind the scenes stuff that you can't even find on the internet. Like they show her doing a table read, and, you know, with other actors and everything like that. They show different interviews of the actors talking about Janet and her working on the film and all of that good stuff right there. And of course, Q-Tip was actually there as well, because if you remember, he played her boyfriend in the beginning of the movie, the one who got shot and killed in the car when they was at the drive-in. And he was talking about how he enjoyed during the scenes, of course, when he had to kiss her. And he said they did that take like 20 times. But of course, he didn't mind. What guy at that time wouldn't have mind been able to work with Janet Jackson and being able to kiss her? And then when Tupac was being interviewed on Arsenio, you know, he was basically saying, you must feel like the luckiest man in America right now, because you got to do a movie with Janet Jackson. And not only that, but you got to kiss her as well. So every guy in America was probably, you know, feeling some type of way that Tupac and Q-Tip were able to kiss Janet Jackson, because, you know, every guy wanted to be with Janet Jackson. The next thing they talked about was the Again music video, which is the song that was attached to the Poetic Justice soundtrack. They literally, like, if you watch that movie Poetic Justice, you will always hear the melody of that song throughout, or sprinkled throughout that entire movie up until the end, where you actually hear her sing the song. They're talking about the song itself, then they talk about the making of the video. I didn't even know that her husband Rene had that much hands in her career. Like, I didn't really know he was that hands-on with her career, which at the time was a good thing, but then eventually it started to take its toll and turn into something a little bit more negative. But we'll get into that. And for those of you who don't know, the song Again was actually nominated for an Oscar for Best Original Song. Unfortunately, Janet did not win the award, but she did get acknowledged by the Academy for that song. And it's a very beautiful song. Like, I feel like I don't have to ask anybody, have you ever heard of that song before? Because I think by now we all know and have heard of that song. So we pretty much know or are aware of it. And you can even just hum it, or when the minute that it comes on from that first chord, you already know what song that it is. The next thing that they talk about is that Rolling Stone cover, which eventually turned into her Janet cover album, which is the one where she's standing there with her hands behind her head, and we saw these mysterious hands covering her breast. For years, no one knew who that person was that was holding her breast. For years, no one knew, until it finally came out years later that it was her husband that was holding her breast and everything like that. A lot of guys were saying, I wish that was me holding her breast. And that, you know, that was a very risky photo that she took for the Rolling Stone cover, but it also became one of the most iconic pictures of all time, or one of the most iconic covers for Rolling Stone. They went into detail saying that while the rest of the world loved it, her family was not really receiving of it, especially her mother and her sister Rebe. Like, they basically said that they told Janet they did not like that cover. They hated it and everything, wished that she didn't do it. And, you know, that's pretty much what it is. And it's almost like it's a foreshadowing of what was to come in 2004, which we're definitely going to highlight on this review. But they really said they really didn't appreciate that she did that because they felt like she didn't have to do it. But this Janet album was her showing her more sexier, sensual side of her that we never saw from her first, well, the Control and the Rhythm Nation album. It's like every album of Janet's that she's come out with is like an evolution of her life going forward. It's not like she's trying to regress. She's progressing with her career. As long as she's growing, her music is going to continue to grow. The content is going to continue to grow. So now we're seeing sexy Janet. So I guess it kind of, you know, it fit for the time and for the make and model of this album, which was a sexy album. The next thing that they talked about was her starting to do the lap dances on stage. As we know, Janet Jackson back in the 90s was one of the first female artists to do lap dances for her audience. They would pull a guy from the stage or from the audience, basically someone who was handpicked by Rene, and they had to quickly brief him like, look, this is a lap dance. Don't get to it. Don't get aggressive with her. Don't say anything derogatory or anything like that. Don't even try to kiss her or anything like that. Just let her do her thing with you on the stage. And she's been doing it ever since. Of course, now she doesn't do it anymore. But back then, if you was one of those guys that was lucky enough to get pulled up on the stage by Janet and get a lap dance, you was probably like the most respected guy in your neighborhood. Probably, most likely, for sure. Ever for the rest of your life. That's something that's going to be etched in your mind for the rest of your life. Of course, years later, she started to escalate a little bit more with the lap dances, like putting them on a little contraption and rotating them around and her climbing up on top of them. As a matter of fact, if you remember when the singer Normani performed at the VMAs this past year, she kind of did the same thing with the lap dance thing, but she had Teyana Taylor on the contraption and she kind of did the same thing that Janet was doing. So we already knew that's where she got the inspiration from when she did that particular performance. So the next thing that comes up is Janet Jackson is offered a Coca-Cola deal. Now, what's interesting about that is that we know that her brother Michael got the Pepsi deal. You know, he's had so many Pepsi commercials over the years, and he actually said that he really didn't like soda. But fun fact, he didn't like soda, but he said you can put the soda and advertisement in the commercial with me as long as I don't have to drink it. He really didn't like soda like that. So, but Pepsi was like, okay, we'll abide by it because they really wanted him to be a part of the endorsement. So Janet's going to meet with the Coca-Cola people to sign a deal in order to do this multi-million-dollar endorsement with Coca-Cola. Then all of a sudden, this happens. Michael Jackson's first round of allegations of child molestation occurs in 1993. And, you know, that's a whole big deal at that time. And because of that, Coca-Cola ended up pulling the deal away from her. Like, they literally backed out of the deal. Janet was not going to be allowed to advertise Coca-Cola for them because of her being the sister to Michael Jackson. So that's why she said guilty by association. If you all watched the trailer for it, that's where that line comes from. She's basically saying, I had nothing to do with whatever's going on with Michael right now, but because my last name is Jackson and because I am his sister and he is my brother, I can no longer be a part of this Coca-Cola deal that I had that was coming my way. And I think that was messed up because she had nothing to do with what was going on with Michael. She was her own person, but they were still, again, constantly linking them together. And that's what ended up happening. And that's how she lost out on a deal that she literally was getting ready to click that pen and sign her name off of. And then that happened. And then she lost the deal. The next thing that happened was Janet and Michael working on Scream, which is probably one of the best collabs ever because you have an iconic duo, an iconic brother, an iconic sister working on this together. And I really like the video clips that they showed with this segment right here of Michael and Janet inside of his apartment. And Janet is right there in the room typing on a laptop, typing up the lyrics, for his part and then typing up the lyrics for her part and them going over the song of how it's going to sound and everything like that. And that's just a moment, a good brother sister moment that we never got to see. That's why I said I like it about this documentary is we saw clips that we've never, ever seen before. So we see them together working on this iconic song. And we know Scream is like one of the best collabs, one of the best songs, one of the best videos, one of the most expensive videos, if not still the most expensive video ever made, $7 million. That's a lot of money. And Janet even went on to say that that was a video that was not even supposed to cost nearly that much. I think they said originally the video was only supposed to cost like $2 million. So you talking about went $5 million over budget. And I think Michael paid most for most of that video to be made. And, you know, good thing he did, because that's exactly what we ended up with. One other thing that Janet mentioned was when they were shooting the videos, when Michael was shooting parts by himself, he was shooting at night. When Janet was shooting her parts of the video, she was shooting during the day. And then you had the parts where they would come together and do their parts together. But those were very short shoots because they were always separate. And she would say that whenever he would shoot his parts, they had it be very private. It wasn't open like hers was. And she was basically saying she felt like that was the beginning of them trying to drive a rift between them, or try to make it a competitive thing. So it's crazy how she mentions all of that, and we're looking at the video and how much fun they're having. But she says that shooting that video was rough for a multitude of reasons. But, you know, looking at the video from the outside looking in, we're like, they're brothers and sisters doing this iconic song, this iconic collab with each other, and they're having the fun time of their lives. But behind the scenes, they weren't having that much fun. That's interesting to hear and to find out through her. The next part that happened was talking about the rift in the relationship between her and Rene Elizondo. So this was getting to that point where the fairy tale relationship that she's having with this man is now starting to turn into a nightmare, because she's basically saying that he started to turn into a control freak, controlling her image, saying how she looks, how she has to dress. And she said that he was a person that liked to always record things. It's almost like he was vlogging before vlogging became a thing. And it was like, the camera was always on, but it was never always off. It was even a part where she was talking about when going to meet her, see her mother, and how she almost got into a little small argument in front of her mother with Rene, because she said, I just want to have this moment with my mother without the camera being put on her. And it's almost like he wasn't trying to understand where she was coming from, and she was getting upset. Clearly, she was like, look, I'm trying to have this moment with my mother. She doesn't like to be on camera like that. Can you please turn the camera off? And it was almost like you trying to go back and forth with her about the camera situation while her mother was there. And then he finally budges and turns the camera off. And even it started to get on her dancers' nerves, because they went on a trip to, I think, Hawaii. And he would always have the camera out and always recording, to the point where her dancers was getting annoyed by it. So she was just like, okay, this is too much. It's too much going on. And then on top of that, she found out that he started getting addicted to painkillers. So now here she is with yet another man with a seemingly drug addiction. Maybe not to the extent of James DeBarge, but taking drugs nonetheless. And then, of course, that's when the relationship started to dissolve itself out. And Janet was like, look, looks like I'm headed for another divorce. And that's exactly what happened with this one. So now at this point, she's gotten a divorce from Rene. Now we head into the Velvet Rope album tour, which in my opinion was one of the best tours I've ever seen. If y'all have never seen when she did the Velvet Rope tour on HBO, at Madison Square Garden, if you look it up, you can probably find the entire tour on YouTube. But I remember when it came on back in '97, and me at 8 years old watching that whole thing on a Saturday night was one of the highlights of my childhood. That was one of the best tours I have ever seen in my life. I wish I could have been there, but of course, a young person like myself probably definitely would have made it, but it is what it is. And was able to watch her and do her thing for that album. I feel like the Velvet Rope is probably one of her most underrated albums. It's a very, very, very good album, because it's a mix of, it's almost like a combination of her Janet album and probably her Rhythm Nation album a little bit. It's like a combination. Now you got the sexy, you got the pop, you got the dance, you got the R&B, a little bit of hip hop in there. It's a lot going on with that album. But also, while she was working on the tour, that's when she was still going through stuff with Rene. I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. They weren't divorced yet, but they were headed that way, because Rene was always there with her, everywhere. But that was the first time she was working on a tour or any project and he was not involved. And that's when people around her started to notice that there was an issue going on in the relationship. And that's when it started to lead more into the divorce. And then he was starting to talk about, you know, her image and everything like that. And then that's when Janet started to briefly talk about her weight issues. And she brought up about how when she was younger, Michael would talk about, you know, calling her certain names and everything like that. And then, of course, the media tried to spin it. And, you know, recently, the media tried to spin it into, oh, Michael was calling her fat and everything like that. But she said siblings talk about siblings all the time. It's not, she said it's not out of malice. Of course, it did hurt, but it's not something that she took to heart. I mean, well, she kind of did, but she, you know, she got over it because she know it wasn't from a place of completely a dark energy. And, you know, she knows that Michael wasn't saying that to deliberately hurt her feelings, because she threw the shots right back at him. You know, it's like siblings do that all the time, but, you know, they had to try to make a story out of it. But she didn't know, she knew that he didn't mean nothing by it. But when she said when it came from Rene, then that was a different thing, because this is not technically family. This is just someone I'm in a relationship with. This is someone who I'm married to. Like, why would you like come at me sideways about this when you've never done that before? So where's this coming from? Let's see. The next thing that they talked about, we're jumping ahead a few years now, and we're going to All For You, which is, of course, 2001. So, you know, she comes out with an All For You album. She talked briefly about her working on The Clumps, you know, with Eddie Murphy, because she was in that movie. Working on the video for All For You, which was probably one of the most artistic videos that I've seen her actually do. How, you know, the scenery and everything like that. That song like took off like a rocket. Like when that song came out, it shot off, especially since this is the first album that Janet had released since 97. So people hadn't really heard from her in a while. So, you know, she had to gather herself back together, and she came out with that All For You album, and that was a very good album. Then she talks about Jermaine Dupri. Now she's met Jermaine Dupri. They start dating. And a lot of people thought that, you know, like Jermaine Dupri of all people, why is Janet dating him? You know, there was a lot of questionable things about that relationship at the time. But over time, people got used to it, and they look like they made a very good couple. Then we get to this part, and you know what part I'm about to talk about. And that is 2004, the Super Bowl. So Janet is approached, you know, to do the Super Bowl. This was her show. Originally, Janet was going to do this entire show by herself, which she definitely could, because she didn't really need anybody. But then eventually they just kind of threw Justin in there as a surprise guest, because they, you know, Justin's coming off of being out of NSYNC. Now he's a solo artist. He came out with that Justified album, and now he's by himself. So he's a hot item at that time too. So Janet, you know, getting prepared, practicing, rehearsing, getting everything together for the Super Bowl. Then, you know, they perform, and then they do that song, Rock Your Body. And you know that line, have your naked by the end of this song, pulls off the strap, or pull off the piece, the clothing, and it reveals her breast. And all hell broke loose since then. I remember being 14, turning 15 that year, because the Super Bowl, of course, was in February. My birthday's in May. I was 14 watching that, and was completely shocked by what I was watching, because I knew what I was seeing, but I just couldn't believe that it was actually in real time in front of my face. And I'm sure a lot of people felt the same way. One of her dancers was saying, like, when that happened and they cut the lights off, he said he ran off that stage. He said he didn't even wait for an applause. They just ran off the stage, and then a whole bunch of stuff happened. The FCC got involved. A bunch of reporters, you know, got involved. They started writing up all these things. You had all these activist groups coming at her and all types of stuff. And while she's getting all of that flack, Justin was getting nothing. Nothing was being said to him. All the slings and arrows and bullets and everything was coming directly at her. She was taking all of it. And then they fast forward a little bit to present day, where Randy says that Justin's people have reached out to him to say that they want to do or redo the Super Bowl, but do it right this time. And she's looking like, really? I don't think that we can redo that. Like, that's not something I want to do. And I think he asked her, would she do it? And she said, just flat out said no. I said, good answer, because why would you want to rehash and redo something that was not only traumatic for you, but it took it literally put a huge dent into your career. And then, of course, following that, the following week, she was supposed to, you know, the Grammys was happening, because the Grammys was always the week after the Super Bowl. And Justin got an invite. You know, he was slated to go to the show, but Janet was too. But guess who got disinvited? She did. And we can thank Les Moonves for that. They didn't mention Les Moonves in this, but he was the reason why she did not get invited, because he was over at CBS at the time. Man, that whole incident, she got disinvited from the Grammys. Her Demeter Joe album was the first album that she came out with that was not number one. It actually came in at number 2 out of the consecutive albums that she had came out with prior to that. She pretty much got blacklisted, like, from everything. Like, this one incident ruined her career. She even said in the when she was talking to Randy, how people wanted to put her away for a nipple. And I was like, people wanted her locked up for that. It was that serious to them, not to us. But we know what it was, because let's be real here. It was definitely some racism that played a part in this incident. Let's be completely honest. And look at the stuff that people are doing today. Back then, that would be considered tame compared to what we see right now. But that whole Super Bowl incident literally put a huge halt on her career. You're talking about a woman that comes from one of the most well-known entertainment families ever, has done her thing for the last 10 or so plus years, maybe more, 20 plus years at that point. And this is how she gets treated. They made it seem like she just came out that day, and that's how they treated her. And she said, you know, they have a history. She knows she has a history with CBS. I highly doubt that Janet would do anything with CBS now, especially now knowing what we know. But yeah, that whole thing was crazy. And then right on the cusp of the Super Bowl, you had the second round of allegations with Michael Jackson occurring. And that was a whole media circus of in itself. It's like they just could not, the Jackson family at that time could not catch a break. Now, of course, we all know what happened with Michael, and that he was found not guilty, but his career really halted after that. Like, he went into like a state of isolation when that occurred. And that was almost like the beginning of the end for the king of music. Cause I don't like to refer him to him just the king of pop, because he covered many genres, but that was like the beginning of the end for him. Little did we know. The next thing we're going to talk about is the breakup between her and Jermaine Dupri. They were together for, I forgot how many years, and I didn't even know they were engaged. I didn't know they were engaged until they had said it in this documentary that they actually were engaged. I just thought they was in this long-standing relationship, but they said that they were engaged for a little bit, but then the relationship ended up getting cut because Jermaine Dupri, in his own words, said he was being reckless, and we already knew what that meant. He was cheating on her. He was, levels of infidelity, and he confirmed it, and she confirmed it, that it was because he was cheating. And she basically said, you know what? You're a busy individual. You don't need to be in a relationship right now because your relationship is your work. And she basically said he just kind of laughed it off and whatnot, but it's almost like she knew. But that's why their relationship ended up ending. The next thing we talk about is Janet getting back into movies thanks to Tyler Perry and Why Did I Get Married? 2007. So she ends up getting, at this point, Janet is like still feeling the bruntness of what happened back in 2004. Like, that thing just kind of stayed with her. No matter what she did after that, they kept bringing that up. But Tyler Perry reached out to her and said, we know that the world is treating you a certain way right now, but it's still some people in your corner. But I'm working on this movie right now, and I want you to be a part of it. So he reached out to her, and he ended up having her in his movie, Why Did I Get Married?, which is based off of one of his stage plays. And she played Malik Yoba's husband, in which her character was like, she was, I forgot what she was. She was a pretty established, she was an author. She was an author, and she was basically dealing with the death of their son, who was with her when they crashed and the son died. And she felt like it was her fault. And she found the way that she tried to like bury the thought of what happened with her son was to wrap herself into her friends' relationships and her book in order to mask what was really going on with her internally. Like, she really never grieved like that. I feel like I'm, telling the story, but I feel like most of us already seen the movie, so you already know the plot. But she had a very complex character that had a lot of layers to it. And then they talk about Why Did I Get Married To, which is the second part to that movie that came out in 2010. And then that's when, of course, around the time of her filming that movie is when they get the horrific news. Well, the world gets that horrific news that Michael Jackson passes away. So imagine like you're working on a movie and everything's going good. And then all of a sudden, right in the middle of you filming, you find out your brother has passed away. Someone you grew up with, someone that you were always close with, someone you always confided with, somebody that was always there in your corner, someone who was one of your biggest support systems, one of the biggest stars on the planet. And this happens while she's filming this movie. So a lot, for anyone who didn't know, when she does those scenes where she's going off, that's real raw emotion of her dealing with her brother's death. Tyler said, whatever you feel you need to get out, just get out in the scene. And that's why her performance felt so raw in that moment, because she was dealing with filming a movie while in the back of her mind, her brother just died. So that was raw emotion right there. At that point, I don't even think she was acting, but that was just raw emotion. And like, you know, when you watch that scene, a lot of people were just like stunned to watch her, you know, in that way, because we always see Janet as this soft spoken person. But in that movie, she like in that scene, in those scenes where she's freaking out and cussing and breaking stuff and all types of stuff, that's a side of Janet that people did not see or was not, you know, aware that she could go to those lengths. But we know why that was. The next thing that they talk about is Janet Jackson's pregnancy. Now, it was controversial of her pregnancy, mainly because because of the rumor of her with the secret baby with James DeBarge, which has been debunked back in the 80s. But now it's controversial because Janet Jackson is about to turn 50. She's having what you call an at-risk pregnancy, a woman who's turning 50, who's about to have a child. And people was like, are they sure that, you know, is she really pregnant? Like, you know, that, I mean, people are they really watching? Because before she was, you know, pregnant, she was getting ready to go on tour, but then she had to go and announce that she was about to have a child. So she had to postpone the tour. I think some people got mad about that too. I remember that, you know, I think that was back in 2016. People got upset about that, but you know, she made up for it when she went back on tour, that following year. So she ends up, you know, getting pregnant from the guy that she once was married to. And I truly believe that was nothing more than a business arrangement marriage, because I think he wanted an heir and she wanted a child. They got together. I think they was only together for like 5 years, and they had a child, and they ended up getting a divorce. And then she got this huge settlement because he's a billionaire, like a multi-billionaire. Like he has more money than the Jacksons. So I think that was an arrangement for him to have an heir and for her to have a child. And now she's, you know, going through motherhood. Even her family was shocked that she had a child, because they said that they did not imagine Janet even having kids. Not Janet not being motherly, but Janet having kids was not in the cards for them. Well, to her, for her to have a child. But they said that, you know, she had a child. They love this little boy and everything like that. They did not show the little boy's face, but they did show her holding him. But her back was covering his face, so we don't see his face. For those of you who will ask, what does he, you know, look like? But I think there are pictures online of her child when he was like a little small baby. Of course, he's older now, where he's definitely walking and probably most likely talking. So, but yeah, but she's keeping that private, sort of like how Michael was with his kids. The next part that we talk about is another tragic moment in Janet's life. And of course, that was the death of her father, Joe Jackson. And I said what's interesting is that Janet lost two men in her life that was an intricate part of her life and her career. She loses her brother while she's working on a film. And now she loses her father while she's working on a music video. So it's like she's losing loved ones while she's working. She's not at peace or just relaxing. She's working. So it's like now she has to have the weight of that, because she actually was working on this song called Made for Now with Daddy Yankee in New York. And I would have never known, looking at the video, that she had gotten news that her father passed away while watching that video, because you would never know. And, you know, it's just unfortunate that all of this stuff is happening around her while she's still working. That's just a testament to how strong-willed she is as a person, as a woman in this industry, to deal with all of that and still come out on top and still, you know, be triumphant through and through to the end. But I like that she really talked very good about her dad yet again. Like, this is, you know, she talked so great about her dad in this moment that she ended up having to tell the cameras to cut off because it got too emotional for her talking about her dad. She really did love her dad, despite what the tabloids might say. I think that all of them really love their dad, despite what they may say. People deal with stuff with their families all the time. It is what it is. They're not perfect. We all know that. But then again, who is? Now, the last part that they talk about is Janet Jackson being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And there was some controversy about that, too, because they feel that Janet should have been inducted a long time ago, but they truly believe that what happened with the Super Bowl back in 2004, that's what hindered her from getting in there. And I truly believe that is the case. That's what hindered her from getting inside of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You got to think, her brothers are in there. Michael is in there by himself. And there's only one person left in the Jackson family who's an entertainer can get in there, and that will be Janet. And now the set would be complete. And I think they're one of the few families where everybody's in, who entertains. But, you know, they were saying that there was a lot of controversy about that. And I truly believe that the fans and social media is what propelled them to get her in there. Like, they were like they were talking, like they were adding the committee, hashtagging, get her in, get her in, get her in, over and over and over and over and over again until they finally had to budge. And then that's when finally in 2019, Janet Jackson was finally inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's like one of the biggest honors that an artist can have, even beyond getting a Grammy. Getting inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that really completely cements your career. It really does, especially when there's not a lot of black artists in there as it is, considering. But that was pretty much the last part that they talked about. The ending was pretty much a lot of different people talking about her. They were showing little highlights and little clips and montages of her career, and everyone just, you know, giving her praises and giving her flowers. And one thing that she said, that if, in so many words, if this was pretty much the end for her right here as far as her career, the only thing that she can do now is be a great mother to her son. And one thing I can say is that she appears to be a great mother, because every time she talked about her son, she always smiled. It's like her face was glowing. Every time she spoke about her son and being a mother, she was always smiling. So you can tell that she really enjoys motherhood. She really enjoys being a mother to her son, and I can, you know, looking at it from, you know, from a distance, it looks like she's doing a good job. And of course she has a huge support system behind her, because with her, it's crazy, her being the baby sister of the family and also being the last to have a child. So now her child is the baby of all the cousins and everything like that. She definitely has a strong support system in that aspect. And, you know, what else can I say? Janet Jackson is just a legend. She's an icon. She's been through so much. She's had a lot of highs and a lot of lows and a lot of in-betweens, but she's managed to fight through and persevere through all of that and through everything that has gone on in her career. And, you know, we are fans out here. Like, we definitely support the Jackson family, even though there may be some things that we may not agree with, but it is what it is. But that's pretty much it. That is my entire review of part 2. I kind of knew part 2 was going to be a little bit longer than part 1 because there was a lot to cover. But I'm glad that I was able to talk about this. I'm glad everybody was able to watch. You know, whether you were entertained, whether you learned something new, because I learned a lot of new things. I'm glad that you were able to watch this with me. Definitely leave your comments down in the comment section below. I can't wait to see what y'all are going to say. I'll be able to be engaged with this one because I don't have to watch anything. I wasn't engaged with the chat on the premiere video, the first one, because I was watching this part right here, but I'll be able to be engaged this time just to see the feedback as it's going in real time. With that being said, go ahead and like, share, subscribe if you are new. Make sure you hit that bell icon and have your notifications set to all so you can be notified every time I upload a new video or go live. And I will talk to you in the next one.